Welcome to What's Your Forte, presented by Bandology.
Hello, and welcome to the 10th episode of What's Your Forte, presented by Bandology, the show where we interview professional musicians, conductors, composers, and educators about their musical journeys and the experiences that brought them to where they are today. On today's episode, we have Guy Few. Guy Few's instrumental versatility and fearless interpretations have been noted by the international press as outrageous, simply phenomenal, and sheer brilliance. He has performed with many Canadian and United States orchestras as both trumpet and piano soloist, and remains a committed chamber artist in the ensembles Few Mara Duo, Bellows and Brass, Few and Fewer, Spirit 20, Sounding Thunder, and Project Aria, and has been a guest at many festivals including the Festival of the Sound, Tanglewood, Takefu International Music Festival, the Organ Bach Festival, Sweetwater, Laura Festival, and the Ottawa International Chamber Music Festival. A prolific recording artist, Guy has released CDs on numerous labels including SNE, Artists Classics, CBC SM5000, Naxos, Hansler Classics, and MSR Classic labels. His recording awards include a shortlist Juno nomination, a Grammy as orchestra member for Penderecki Credo, and Best Classical Orchestral Album for Just Plain Folks Music Awards. Guy has appeared on CBC TV, CTV, Bravo, Television 5, and European television broadcasts, and is heard regularly on CBC Radio and NPR. A personal interest in cavernous hemangioma of the brain led to the creation of Mokutsu, a presentation of his illness, brain surgeries, and restoration, including meditations for pain and stage fright. Guy has presented Mokutsu for brain surgery associations in Canada and the USA, as well as for symposia, universities internationally, and for media. Guy is a sessional lecturer at Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario, Canada, where he teaches trumpet and facilitates the Laurier Brass Ensemble. Guy Few is a Yamaha artist. I'm very excited for the chance to interview Guy Few, so without further ado, let's jump into this week's episode on What's Your Forte. Okay, so welcome to What's Your Forte. Guy, can you briefly describe yourself and the current positions or projects that you're involved in?
Hi, Megan. Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here on your program. Describing myself, I'm a musician. I play trumpet and piano, and I teach at Wilfrid Laurier University. And in my career, I've performed a lot as a chamber musician, a soloist, and also a recording artist.
Fantastic. So can you bring us back to the beginning of your musical journey? What drew you to your first instrument? Was it the trumpet? Was it the piano?
Okay, so I was super hyperactive. When I was 3, I was out of control. So I liked to jump from the tops of staircases. I owned a cape. It was great. And I would do all kinds of very unpredictable things, break things, pull things over. And my parents were very concerned. And I was doing lots of athletics, but they still felt that I needed something else to focus myself. And so they decided that I would take piano lessons. So I started with piano at the age of 4. And I think that it was a really good thing for me because I needed that focus, and to have that was pretty amazing. For trumpet, my mother says I was 8.5, and so that began mostly because my dad had been a cornet player, and everyone knew that, and he owned a cornet, and I had relatives who were really good trumpet players. So I assumed, evidently, that I would be taking trumpet lessons. I did begin on cornet, though, at 8.5, and I sang.
The cornet, some people who are listening might not be familiar with it, briefly describing the difference between cornet and B-flat trumpet.
Sure. A cornet is smaller, tighter. It's shorter, and it has a conical structure, so that means that it gradually gets bigger from the beginning of the instrument where the mouthpiece is until the bell. A trumpet is a cylindrical instrument until the very end when it flares into the bell. It's a bigger instrument, and to compare the quality of playing for the two instruments, trumpet it's stronger, it has a more athletic kind of sound, and a cornet is more flexible and more unstable. It has issues, usually with tuning, and is a great instrument to start on because you have to really lock in pitches and figure out how to play it. And it is a well-known instrument in the international silver band circuit or the British competition bands. A lot of their brass players, their high brass players, play a range of cornets, from alto cornets up to sopranino cornets or super tiny ones. We would have a piccolo trumpet as a comparison to that.
Thank you. Yeah, fantastic. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember this story. I don't know if you told it to me or I read it somewhere, that you started playing the piano because your neighbor came over to show you something that they were working on. You're like, I can do that. And then you just played it.
That's almost it. We went to our first lesson, and I was taking lessons with Brenda. She lived next door. And Brenda and I went to our first lesson with this very proper British woman. And we went into her house, and my mom and I stood away from the piano. We couldn't see the keyboard. And Brenda and her moms were on the keyboard side, and we were introduced to this woman. And then Brenda said, I have something that I learned. And our piano wasn't being delivered that day, so I had nothing. Brenda sat down and she played a piece. And she played a piece with two hands, which is a really amazing thing for a beginner to do. But they'd had the piano in their house for a month. So I said, I can play that piece. And the very proper English lady said, oh, please sit down and play it. Evidently, I played the same thing that Brenda had just played, having not been able to see the keyboard and not ever having played piano before myself. That's what I've been told. And it was the same key and everything, but I'd never played a piano up until that point in my entire existence of 3 years and a half, 4 years. So everybody was thrilled. But I didn't find out about this until later. I don't know how thrilled Brenda was. Brenda probably wasn't very thrilled.
That's such a great story. So what drew you to pursue music as a career and take it to the next level, like to post-secondary?
I had this feeling when I was younger. I was doing a lot of competing and a lot of performing, and some of my first professional engagements, I was 10, I think, and I played lots and lots of those R-bound solos and all of the trumpet concertos and all of that stuff, and I just assumed that I would perform as my career. It all took a terrible turn. I'm not sure, well, not terrible, a weird turn. I thought that I should have a very active national or international career by the time I was 16. And if I didn't, I was going to quit. So I did. I quit at the age of 16 when I didn't have a fabulous international career. And I went into the School of Business at the University of Saskatchewan. And I stayed there for 3 days. At the end of which I decided that actually music was the thing I wanted to do, and so I went back. So if we were to say when did it happen, probably at first when I was 12 or 11, and then the second time was the 4th day of business school at the University of Saskatchewan.
So then that brought you to Laurier in Ontario, so you moved to an entirely new province.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was fine. I was used to traveling at that point, and I went to summer schools and things like that. So I only had one pair of jeans and one casual sweater, and everything else was dress clothes or tuxedos or tails or any of those things. I remember a trunk of clothing arrived at my residence. But school itself was really fun. I met lots of really neat people, and the faculty then as now was really interesting. People that were doing cool things. It was exciting. I enjoyed my years at Laurier.
Awesome. So that actually brings us to the middle of the interview, which is what we call the Fast 5 Rapid Round.
Okay.
5 super quick questions, and the answer is the first thing that pops into your head.
Okay, I'm ready.
Number 1, concert you attended.
The most exciting concert that I remember was Marilyn Horne, a singer, and I went to her recital had the most impact on me. I had a series of vocal recitals at Roy Thompson Hall, and I went while I was at university, so I would go to Toronto and see those concerts, and that one made the biggest impression. She was really a fun person, I think. Having read her biography, she seems like a real hoot. So, and all kinds of terrible things happened to her. Also, really great things. She was brought out of the chorus at the Met at last minute notice and sang the lead role of Carmen, and that vaulted her to international stardom. Really neat voice, and I loved listening to her.
Wow. Who is musical inspiration growing up?
When I was young, I was really obsessed with the classical superstars. They were the people that I listened to a lot, and so as a pianist, my big inspiration came from Rubinstein, a wonderful pianist who was really active, probably, I guess we could say, mid-20th century. I loved listening to his recordings and the recordings of Horowitz. And then as a trumpeter, my inspiration came from Maurice Andre. Amazing, plays everything perfectly. I don't think he ever messed anything up.
That's a really good one. Number 3 is your favorite movie soundtrack.
Oh boy. There's some movies that I just adore, and one that I really love was the Zeffirelli production in the 60s of Romeo and Juliet, and I just love the score from that movie, which has some very famous pop songs from that time. Yeah, I'd say the Romeo and Juliet Zeffirelli score.
I thought you were going to say Sound of Music.
You know what, Megan? Those two were fighting in my brain at exactly the same time, and we could do the whole show. You want to do the whole show? I know all the parts. I actually went to the sing-along Sound of Music. I went as the goat herd, and my sister went as the goat, and we won a costume prize. It was so great. Those two were fighting in my brain.
And then the 4th one is an instrument that you wish you played.
Wish I played the violin, because I know I could look really good holding it for publicity photos. in the whole, I could do the whole Horowitz, the whole Heifetz twist. My sister was a violinist and studied with Murray Adaskin, who was a wonderful Canadian composer and violinist. And she studied with him for quite a few years. And I just love violin.
And then the last question of the rapid round is a hidden talent.
I remember doing an interview for CBC Radio decades ago, and I played a piece where I played piano and trumpet at the same time. And Peter Zosky, who was the person who interviewed me, said to me, "What? You can't make balloon animals? You should be able to do balloon animals if you can do that." And so I went home and learned to make balloon animals. But I think it's a lost skill now. Once I was able to do it. Now I've said it. Somebody's going to know, and I'm going to have to be able to produce.
It has to be your next concert opener.
That's right.
Bandology is a proud Canadian nonprofit dedicated to more music for more kids via education, collaboration, and community. Find out more at bandology.ca.
What's been the highlight of your career so far?
I think that there have been so many really great moments for me. I can choose one, but again, it involves a story. And that is the first time that I played Brandenburg, which is for piccolo trumpet. It's for a concerto grosso, so a small group of soloists and strings and continuo. So I played Brandenburg at a festival in the United States, and it went super well. And we played the third movement again, faster, as our encore, and the audience went ballistic. And that was really exciting. And the next day, I was walking to the concert hall, and it was one of those cities that had numerous sidewalk cafes that take over the entire sidewalk. And so there were 3 cafes that we had to walk through. And I was walking with a violinist, two violinists actually, and as we walked through cafe number 1, everyone at that cafe stood up and clapped. It floored me because it was the next day and we were going to do another concert, but still it was the next day. We were dressed for the concert. Anyway, it just knocked me flat.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And just clapping for that, and not saying anything, but just clapping for that performance that I'd done the night before really, really touched me. Because Brandenburg practically kills you, right? So it's really, you lived.
Right, it looks hard. All right, and then so the next one is, why is music education important to you?
Music education is one of the most important things in my musical life. And the reasons are multiple, but one of the things that I think features most strongly is something one of my teachers said many years ago, and she was being really helpful, and she was one of my piano teachers, and she was also my collaborative pianist, and I would have 3 piano lessons a week, and she was charging me for one, but she wasn't charging me for the other 2. And one day when I was desperately trying to pay her, she said, listen, someday you will find that you need to give back. And when you give back, then you will see why we've been doing this. And I think that that's one of the strongest reasons for what I do. It's to try to share what I know and also my instincts. As some of the people that are listening may know, I'm quite an instinctive teacher, both physically and musically. So when I'm able to let that loose in a student or help them through a struggle, or help them to find that moment that really means something, then I'm truly giving back.
And that kind of dovetails into the next question, which is, do you have any advice for young musicians? So I know you do a lot of clinics and adjudication, and you teach privately at Laurier as well. So you have a lot of young musicians that you see frequently.
I feel that we have to find ways to get rid of our fear. I think fear is something that really shuts the majority of people down. I have fear too. And so for me to get rid of that involves a lot of work. But when I do, my ability improves. My technical, musical, emotional ability improves. So we just need to unlock that door. And I think that that's something that is useful for everybody. I think everybody I teach is scared in some way. And I only recognize it because I'm scared myself. And it's great to find common ground. Finding commonality between one person and another can be the thing that connects them forever. It can also be the thing that releases somebody so that they can actually move forward and not be frozen. And aren't we all trying to do that?
That actually brings us to our last question, which is, do you have any exciting plans or new projects coming up?
I do, actually. There are 2. I'm in the middle of a project that was supposed to be a 2-year project, but now I think will be a 3-year project, and that is a shared teaching and performing experience with Lyon Conservatory and Arnaud Scott. Arnaud came already to Laurier and did some performing, and I will be going to France to teach there and also do some other concerts in France. The second project is super exciting. I just received a completed concerto of 4 movements by Boyd MacDonald that I have premiered the first movement with Kitchen Waterloo Chamber Orchestra and Matthew Jones conducting. But since that time, Boyd has written 3 more movements, and the orchestra has decided to perform that piece in their next complete season. So I just received delivery of that concerto yesterday, and it's for trumpet piano / in between those words and orchestra. So I play both at the same time, sometimes alone, and I'm really looking forward to learning 3 more movements.
So if people want to stay up to date on the things that you're doing, or they want to learn more about you, where can they go?
Well, there are various places that, of course, following what Laurier shares. Laurier shares some of my concerts, both with Arnaud Scotte and Stephanie Mara, and also with Rachel Thomas and Stephanie. You can follow me on Instagram or Twitter. You can also go to my website, guyfew.com.
So that brings us to the end of the interview, actually, guys. So I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day.
It was super exciting, and I'm so glad that you invited me.
A big thank you again to Guy Few for being a guest on What's Your Forte presented by Bandology. If you want to stay up to date or catch up on any of the episodes, you can follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or subscribe to us on YouTube.
Thanks for joining us on What's Your Forte presented by Bandology. If you liked what you heard, you can find out more about this series and our organization at bandology.ca, which features information about research, advocacy, and music education, and our band camp and play a gig programs. Follow us on social media for more videos and performances on Instagram and Facebook.